The door to the guest room was ajar. She never opened it. The sentence formed in Mara's mind the moment she saw it, the way certain observations arrive already shaped into words. She stood halfway down the hall, one hand resting against the wall where the paint had gone faintly cool under the night air. The guest room door leaned open by perhaps 2 inches. Not enough to show the room itself, just darkness framed by the thin line of the doorway. Mara did not move. The house was quiet in the way houses become after midnight. The refrigerator cycling softly in the kitchen, the distant hum of a transformer somewhere down the block, the faint expansion of wood settling as the temperature dropped. She knew that door. She knew the weight of its hinges and the way it stayed closed once latched. It had a habit of sticking slightly in the frame. You had to pull it firm to open it again. And she never opened it. Her breath came out slow through her nose. The air in the hallway felt cooler than the living room behind her, as if the darkness beyond the guest room carried its own temperature. It was an old house, but not a creaky one. The floors were pine, dull with years of polish. The hallway bulb glowed behind a frosted cover that softened the light into a tired yellow haze. Nothing moved. Mara stepped forward. The floorboard beneath her foot gave a quiet complaint. Not loud, just the familiar flecks of old wood. She waited afterward, listening. The house listened back. The door remained where it was, ajar by the same narrow margin. She reached the frame and placed 2 fingers against the edge of the door. The wood felt colder than the wall. For a moment she considered closing it immediately, the way someone might push shut a cabinet they didn't remember opening. Simple. Mechanical. Instead, she leaned slightly and looked through the gap. Darkness. A slice of the room's interior. The corner of the dresser. The pale square of moonlight touching the carpet near the window. Everything looked the way it had for months. Unused. The guest room had been closed since autumn. Mara remembered the last time she'd stepped inside. The stale smell of stored linens. The careful arrangement of the bedspread she'd smoothed flat before shutting the door again. That had been weeks ago. Maybe longer. She nudged the door open another inch. The hinge whispered. A faint change in air brushed her forearm, like the room exhaling after being sealed too long. The smell was familiar. Dust. Clean cotton. Something faintly dry, like paper left in a drawer. Nothing else. Mara opened the door wider and reached inside to flip the light switch. The bulb clicked on with a low hum. The guest room revealed itself slowly under the dim light. The narrow bed against the wall, the dresser with its empty top, the folded quilt at the foot. A chair near the window where moonlight still pressed against the glass. Everything undisturbed. She stood in the doorway. Her shoulders ached from the day. Work, errands, the dull exhaustion that had followed her for weeks like a shadow. The house had been the one place that stayed predictable. She stepped inside. The carpet softened her footsteps. The room felt slightly cooler than the hallway. Mara scanned the floor first. No footprints. No objects out of place. The dresser drawers were closed. The bedspread lay smooth. The window was locked. She walked to it anyway, touching the latch just to confirm. The metal was cold and rigid. Outside, the backyard was a dark square of grass and fence. The wind barely moved the trees. When she turned back toward the door, she paused. The hallway light behind her seemed dimmer from inside the room, the bulb's glow bending oddly around the doorframe. The open door cast a long shadow across the carpet. For a moment she felt something subtle in the air, a difference she couldn't quite place. Pressure, like the shift in a room when someone else enters quietly. Mara looked around again. Nothing. She crossed the room to the dresser and rested her fingers on the wood. Dust coated the surface lightly, undisturbed. Except, she leaned closer. Near the edge, the dust had been broken by a narrow crescent shape. Not a fingerprint. Not exactly. More like the faint arc left by something set down briefly and removed. Her throat tightened. She tried to remember the last time she had touched the dresser. Had she? Maybe she'd placed something there weeks ago and forgotten. That was possible. Lately, memory blurred around the edges. Still, the shape felt recent. Mara turned toward the bed. The quilt lay folded with the corners tucked neatly beneath. The pillows rested against the headboard. She stepped closer. Something about the bed looked wrong. Not visibly wrong, just subtly different, the way a photograph seems altered even when you can't immediately identify the change. Her hand hovered over the mattress. Then she noticed the indentation. It was shallow, almost invisible, but the fabric between the pillows dipped slightly, as though weight had rested there earlier and only recently lifted. Mara's pulse thudded once in her ear. She stared at the shape. Slowly, very slowly, it softened and vanished as the mattress finished rising back to level. The house made a quiet sound behind her. A floorboard shifting somewhere down the hall. She turned sharply. The doorway was empty. The hallway stretched toward the living room in silent yellow light. For a moment she considered calling out. Instead she walked to the door and stepped into the hall. The air outside felt warmer again. Familiar. She reached for the guest room door. And stopped. The hinge side of the doorframe showed faint scratches. Thin marks in the paint near the latch. Mara frowned. They looked recent. As if the door had been pushed open and closed repeatedly, the latch scraping against the strike plate. Her chest tightened. She didn't remember that happening. But the marks were there. Mara closed the door slowly. The latch clicked. She stood with her hand on the knob, breathing carefully. The hallway returned to its quiet rhythm. The refrigerator humming, the distant transformer buzzing, the gentle creak of wood cooling in the night. After a minute she turned off the hall light and went to bed. Sometime later she woke. Not abruptly, just drifting upward through sleep until awareness returned. The house was dark. Her bedroom window showed a pale rectangle of moonlight. For a moment she lay still, listening to the silence. Then she heard it. A faint sound from the hallway. Not footsteps, more like the soft pressure of air moving under a door. Mara sat up. Her bedroom door was open. She always left it open. From the bed she could see down the hall. And there, faint in the moonlight, the guest room door was ajar again. The same narrow gap. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't imagined closing it. She remembered the click of the latch clearly. She swung her legs to the floor. The air felt colder now. As she stepped into the hallway, the boards gave small, reluctant creaks beneath her weight. The guest room waited at the end, silent. Mara approached slowly. The door had opened the exact same amount as before. 2 inches. No more. She placed her hand against it. The wood felt cold again. But this time, something else brushed her senses. An almost imperceptible warmth drifting through the gap. Warm air. From inside. Her pulse quickened. The room had been cold earlier. She pushed the door open. The light switch clicked. The room looked unchanged. Bed smooth. Dresser dusty. Window locked. Yet the air was undeniably warmer. And faintly humid. Mara stepped inside. Her eyes moved across the room and stopped. The bedspread. It was no longer tucked the way she remembered. The corner hung slightly loose, as if someone had shifted beneath it and let it fall. Mara's throat tightened. She stepped closer. The mattress dipped. Not from her weight. From the other side. A slow, gradual depression forming beside the pillow. She froze. The indentation deepened gently, like someone sitting down with careful patience. The air beside her warmed further. A subtle scent rose from the mattress, soap, maybe, or skin. Then softly the bed creaked. Mara backed toward the door, heart hammering. The indentation held its shape. Waiting, she stepped into the hallway and shut the door. This time she locked it. The lock clicked with finality. She stood there trembling, staring at the knob. For several seconds nothing happened. Then, the handle turned slightly from the inside. Not enough to open. Just testing the lock. Mara stumbled backward. Her breath shook as she stared at the door. And slowly, with terrible clarity, a memory surfaced. The last time she had been in the guest room. Not weeks ago. Last night. She remembered standing by the bed, exhausted after another sleepless evening. Remembered thinking how quiet the room felt compared to her own. Remembered lying down for just a moment. Just to rest. Her stomach twisted, because she also remembered something else now. The feeling of waking up suddenly in the dark. The sense that someone was already lying beside her. And the quiet realization that she hadn't been alone in the house after all. Mara looked at the locked guest room door. Behind it, the floor creaked once. Softly, as if someone inside had finally stood up. And now understood why she'd left the door ajar. Her voicemail inbox was full of static recordings. I discovered it sometime after midnight, when the apartment had gone completely still. My phone screen glowed faintly in the dark as I sat on the edge of the couch. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and the citrus cleaner I'd used earlier to wipe down the kitchen counters. Outside the window, the city had thinned into distant traffic murmurs and the occasional hollow echo of a car passing on wet pavement. I hadn't planned to check my voicemail. The notification had been there all evening, inbox full. A small gray banner above the phone icon. I ignored it for hours, assuming it was a delayed spam burst or a telemarketer glitch. Eventually, curiosity won. I tapped the icon. The screen shifted to a list of messages. Dozens of them. Not from different numbers. Not from anyone I recognized. They all said the same thing. Unknown caller. Timestamps scattered through the night. Some from earlier that evening. Some from yesterday. Some from times I was certain I had been holding the phone in my hand. I scrolled slowly. Every message had the same duration. 0:31. 31 seconds. My shoulders sagged a little with tired irritation. Spam recordings sometimes had odd formatting. Maybe a robocall bug. I pressed play on the newest one. For a moment there was nothing. Then static. Not the clean digital hiss you hear from bad audio files. This was softer, layered. Like distant radio interference mixed with the faint rustle of fabric. The phone speaker vibrated slightly against my palm. The static rose and fell unevenly. I held the phone closer to my ear. Somewhere inside the noise, something clicked. A small sound. Metallic. Then the static swallowed it again. The recording ended. 31 seconds exactly. I frowned and played the next one. More static. This time it was louder, fuller, almost textured. It reminded me of wind pushing through a long hallway or air moving through wires. Halfway through, I thought I heard breathing. I froze. The sound was faint, so faint I couldn't be certain. Just a soft rhythmic rise buried under the interference. Then it was gone. The message ended. I sat there for a moment staring at the screen. 32 unread messages remained. My apartment pressed around me in quiet layers. The refrigerator humming softly in the kitchen. The tick of the wall clock above the bookshelf. The faint rattle of pipes somewhere in the building. I told myself it was audio artifacts. Cheap robocall recordings layered with background noise. Maybe fragments from other calls. Still, I tapped the next one. Static again. But this time something else rode beneath it. A whisper. Not words, just the shape of speech. The rise and fall of syllables muffled by distortion. My chest tightened. I lifted the volume. The whisper sharpened slightly. I leaned forward without realizing it. The static pulsed. For a moment, just a moment, the whisper aligned into something that almost sounded like my name. Then the recording ended. The apartment felt smaller suddenly. I set the phone on the coffee table and rubbed my face. Spam! I muttered to the empty room. My voice sounded too loud. I reached for the phone again. The next voicemail began with heavier distortion. A crackling hiss like radio feedback. Beneath it, something tapped intermittently. 3 quick knocks repeating every few seconds. Tap, tap, tap. I listened all the way through. 31 seconds. The knocks continued the entire time. Slowly, I lowered the phone. From the kitchen, the refrigerator compressor stopped. The silence afterward felt thick. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head. The sound wasn't in the voicemail anymore. It was in the apartment. Faint. Coming from the wall behind the couch. My pulse fluttered. I stood slowly and pressed my ear to the drywall. Nothing. Just the dull, insulated quiet of an interior wall. I stepped back. The tapping didn't return. A pipe settling, I told myself. Or someone upstairs moving furniture. I sat down again, though my shoulders remained tense. There were still 29 voicemails. I pressed play. Static filled the room. But now something else was in it. A low hum. Not mechanical exactly. More like a throat clearing over and over beneath the interference. The sound rose slightly as I leaned closer. Without thinking, I whispered, "Hello." The hum stopped. The static thinned. For half a second, the recording went completely silent. Then a voice spoke, very softly, too distorted to understand. The message ended. I stared at the phone. My reflection stared back from the black screen. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was coincidence, that the silence had happened naturally in the audio. Still, when the next voicemail began, I didn't speak. This one was different. The static started quiet and gradually grew louder, as if someone were turning a dial. Somewhere inside it, footsteps echoed faintly. Not outside. Inside the recording. Slow, careful steps. My breath slowed without me realizing. The footsteps stopped. The static pulsed. And then, a whisper again. Clearer this time. Not my name, just a single word. I rewound the message twice before I was certain. Closer. The phone screen's glow seemed brighter suddenly, bleaching the edges of the room. My apartment looked unfamiliar in the dim light. The couch cushions sagging slightly, the dark rectangle of the hallway leading to the bedroom. The whisper replayed in my head. Closer. My hand moved before I thought about it. I lifted the phone, pressed play on the next voicemail. Static surged immediately, but now the sound had changed. It wasn't just noise anymore. There was space inside it, shapes forming in the distortion. Long stretches of quiet layered beneath the hiss. I realized with slow unease what it sounded like. A room. A quiet room with a faint electrical buzz. My room. I felt the hair on my arms rise. The recording continued. In the background, something shifted. A floorboard creaked. Not through the wall. Through the voicemail. I didn't move. The sound repeated. A second creak. Closer this time. The static thinned enough that I could hear breathing again. Slow. Measured. My throat felt dry. "I'm alone," I whispered, mostly to myself. The recording crackled violently. Then the breathing stopped. The message ended. My voicemail list showed 26 remaining. I didn't want to play another, but my finger hovered over the screen anyway, because something had changed. The timestamps. They weren't just from earlier. The newest message had arrived 2 minutes ago. While I was listening, my heart began to beat harder. I pressed play. The static started softer than before, almost gentle. The sound reminded me of wind moving through grass. Then the recording shifted, and suddenly there was no static at all, just the quiet sound of my apartment, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, even the faint rasp of my own breathing. I stared at the phone, because the recording wasn't capturing the past. It was capturing now. Every sound in the room played through the speaker half a second after it happened. My breathing, the shift of fabric as I moved, a distant car passing outside. All of it echoed through the voicemail. The message continued for several seconds. Then something new entered the recording. A second set of breathing. Softer. Right behind me. I didn't turn around. The voicemail continued for the rest of its 31 seconds. At the very end, just before it cut off, a voice whispered close to the microphone. Not distorted. Perfectly clear. Said very quietly, "Don't hang up."